Hi, Brooke. How are you?
Good. How are you? Of
I'm doing just fine. Thank you for joining me today.
course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we're just gonna wait a few minutes, let everybody get in, and then we will get started. And how's your day going?
It's going pretty good. It's pretty cold and windy up here right now, unfortunately. But it's good.
Yeah, it seems the way I'm over in Rhode Island. It seems the weather keeps like trying to get to spring, and it won't give it to us.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. I was transplanting some strawberries today, and it's really bitter cold out there. Painful in the fingers.
Hopefully, it doesn't result in bitter strawberries, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. They're usually pretty solid.
Very nice. Well, it seems we have a good amount, so are you ready?
Yeah, yeah.
Lovely. So, to everybody viewing, thank you for joining, and welcome to Live to Inspire. My name is Madison Cranford. I am WeINSPIRE's Development and Fund Raising Coordinator Intern, and we are here tonight with Brooke Bridges, kitchen magician, farmer, and food justice assistant manager with Soul Fire Farm, and we will be discussing sustainable agriculture, food sovereignty, and natural health. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And first off, could you please tell us a bit about yourself and what brought you to Soul Fire Farm?
Sure. Yeah. So for those that don't know, I'll just give a little brief intro on what Soulfire Farm does. So Soulfire Farm we are an Afro-Indigenous centered rural community farm that's located in upstate New York. We're in Grafton, and we're committed to uprooting racism and seeding sovereignty in the food system. So we do that in a variety of ways, which I can get to a little bit later. But so that's just who we are. And I'm Brooke. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. So I'm fairly new to the upstate New York, to this side of the country. I have been living in the east on the East Coast since 2017, and I moved out this way in the beginning of just a different phase in my life. You know, I grew up in the entertainment industry. I was an actress my entire life. From the moment like I was 6 months old, I was in TV and commercials and all these things. And I had a really unhealthy relationship with food. So coming to the East Coast, I wasn't really aware of food apartheid. I didn't know what that was. And I heard Leah Penniman, who's our co-founder and farm manager, speak. I was going with a friend to this, presentation that she did. And, so she starts talking about food apartheid. She starts talking about, chattel slavery and just all these things that I hadn't really wrapped my head around. And I was like, I need to work with her. Like, I don't know what, I didn't get a huge idea of like Soulfire, but I was like, I need to do this. And so I went to another one of her presentations, and I was just kind of like hanging around. I saw that they had a job opening and I applied. I did not get that job. But they offered me another job as the kitchen magician, or the assistant kitchen magician, with my friend Rhea, who's the kitchen magician, because I have a background in cooking. And my role just kind of evolved from there. That first summer in 2019 was the best summer of my life, being around a bunch of people, a bunch of Black and brown people who were farming and getting their hands in the dirt and like reigniting their relationship to the land and to growing food, especially in this country. It was something that I had never experienced before. And so now I'm farming, and I'm doing a lot of administrative stuff. I do presentations like this, and I'm actually living here on the land now, with my husband and my 8-month-old baby.
Congratulations. That's really awesome. What's her name or their name?
Her name is Lyris.
Very cute. So tell me about a typical day at Soil Fire Farm for you.
So a typical day at Soulfire Farm, it really varies. So there's 3 of us that are on the farm team, and all 3 of us actually live here on the land, which is really great. And so it just depends what I'm doing. Like some days I'm scheduling out posts for weeks for social media because I run our social media pages. Other days I'm processing checks that come from, the generosity of our community and grants that we get in. So I process those through on the back end and send thank you letters. And then on farm days, for instance, today, I was transplanting or moving some strawberries from one section to another. And then I'm tarping the other section so that we can plant flowers there this year. And so it really just depends on, you know, what's going on. On some days, twice a month, we have work and learn community days. So a bunch of people come up to the land and they volunteer with us to just get whatever work needs to get done around the farm. We're going to start having our farm tours again. So yeah, it really just depends on the day. The three of us in total probably work 50 hours a week on the farm. So our farm time is actually a very small portion of the work that we do. A lot of it is the back of the house, you know, administrative nonprofit work.
Very cool. And then for a lot of our viewers aren't aware of sustainable agriculture, don't know much. Could you explain what food apartheid is and then some of the projects Soulflower Farm is working on?
Sure. So the term food apartheid came about when the term food desert, you know, it's always been the term that was used to describe neighborhoods that struggled to get access to healthy food. And food apartheid really came into play because it makes it just aims to make a distinction. You know, a desert is something that's natural in nature, you know, and not only does it exist in nature, it also says it's like this barren landscape with nothing there. In reality, people who are in neighborhoods where they are struggling to get fresh produce, that is not a natural occurrence. That is systemic. That was created that way. You know, these neighborhoods were created that way. And there is food there. There's plenty of food. It's just not the fresh, life-giving produce that, you know, is what will make us healthy. And so that's what this distinction is. It's unveiling these racially discriminatory political structures that impact food access. Yeah, so it's just a broader, more systemic term and less of oh yeah, there's just no food there kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And so what does, I'm sorry, please continue.
No, I was just trying to remember. Thank you for reminding me. I was trying to remember the second part of the question. So yeah, the ways that we aim, you know, to combat food apartheid is we have like three major legs of the stool. So the first one is utilizing ancestral farming practices, you know, to tend to the land here and grow life-giving food and then give it out for free to people in our community. So that's one of the first things that we do. The second thing, which has seemed to be our most important role in the ecosystem of organizations striving toward food apartheid, is our education. So we run a variety of different programs. One of them is our FIRE workshops. That stands for Farming in Relationship to Earth. And those are week-long programs where people come from all over the world to stay with us for a week and learn about sustainable agriculture, the ancestral practices that we use, and then also like the back end stuff. So like business planning so that they can eventually go out and open up an organization similar to what we have here. And then we also do our one-day workshops that range, you know, from like foraging to herbal medicine. And we have our 3D online workshops that are virtual. We also have our LOL Liberation on Land videos where we bring other people in from our networks to teach about a variety of things, beekeeping, honoring the land, you know, just a variety of different things. And we also have more recently have our Braiding Seeds Fellowship, which is an 18-month-long fellowship that's in collaboration with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And it literally gives people a stipend and mentorship to actually start their projects. So that's kind of like how we're closing the gap there. And then the final thing that we do is we also make a lot of noise, you know, and we help out with policy and we back a lot of different policy that's going toward this movement of food justice and environmentalism.
What do all these projects, they center around community development, food, health. How does food tie into community development?
Yeah, so we all eat, you know, we all eat food and we all deserve to eat life-giving, rich, healthy food. And in order for a community to thrive, we all need to be able to have access to what's going to help us thrive. And, you know, food healthy food is a major part of that, a major component of that. And then also, if you think about, you know, how much food is wasted, if we shift the way that our food system runs, not only are more people going to have access to food, but we're also going to be wasting less food. So, yeah, you know, like that's just our focus is on feeding our community in a way that's sustainable and in a way that pays respect to the land and the earth, and the people who are doing that kind of work.
And what you talked about your relationship with food and how being with Soulfire Farm has really helped change that. What has that change look like, and how might others begin that change within their own lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, I grew up, you know, as an actress, model, I did all that stuff. And it really kind of highlighted the way that food is commodified and used as a means for like vanity, and not given the respect that it deserves. You know, it was like I used it for something that I could change to alter the way that my body looked and, you know, whatever. It was more of like a very trendy, you know, healthy food is kind of trendy. And obviously working with Soulfire, it's really changing that because there are people out there who legitimately do not have access to that avocado that I'm using to make this fancy, pretty avocado toast that I'm going to post on Instagram, you know? And that for me was like, oh my goodness, how, you know, am I treating it like a fun thing when some people don't even have it as a means to actually be, you know, full and you know, ease their hunger and satiated. And so I think a good, for me, what helped me shift that was number one, getting my hands in the dirt, you know, growing stuff. And it just changed my whole perspective, you know, that there are putting a little seed in the ground, tending to it, treating it with love, treating it with respect, and then watching it grow and then harvesting it. And then, you know, putting it on your table and cooking it and, you know, sharing that with people. That whole process just automatically just breeds more respect for that, you know, piece of kale, because it's not small too, you know, it's a very long process growing food and farming. And so it just makes you respect more the people who are, you know, working, primarily immigrant people too, who are working as farm workers and putting so much effort and love into this work, and we don't even recognize them and oftentimes don't even know that they exist. So for me, it was really, yeah, touching the soil, getting my hands in the dirt, and then being connected to the communities that we are, I don't want to say serving because we're not really, they're not, yes, they are underserved in a way, but we're also just inviting them to change their relationship to food, through, you know, yes, giving them food, but also inviting them here to have their hands in the dirt. So what other people could try, you know, is community gardens are around. There are a lot of them around, especially since the pandemic. They're popping up even more. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. And also having little herbs in your house. I had a lot, even in LA. I did have herbs on my windowsill. You know, the dreams of farming, they were always in me, just smaller until I moved out here.
So what would you say are the best like starter plants for people who have never even gardened, never grown their own food? What would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think scallions are excellent start because you can even take some from the grocery store after you've cut them and used them. You can put them in water. They don't even need soil and they'll grow back. I just think scallions or green onions, however you want to refer to them. It's a really easy one. It's very hard. They're very hard to kill, so they can give you a little bit of boost. And then otherwise, herbs are always great, you know. The hardier herbs are easier to keep alive, like thyme is really hardy, lemon balm, mint. Like mint will survive. If you have a tiny garden, I suggest not putting it in the ground though, because it just spreads. I personally like that mint does that, but it can eat up space from other plants. So potted mint is great. I see someone said cilantro. Cilantro is a good option. I find that it's hard to keep alive inside. So if you're doing it inside, I would say don't do that one, unless you have a really bright window. But yeah, I think herbs tend to be a good place to start because you can pull them and that you can eat them fresh too. So they grow fast, they can be consumed quickly. So usually it's a good place to start.
Yeah, thank you. I've been dealing with mint for a few years now. I planted some, and it's throughout my whole house, like through the concrete. It's actually, be careful of mint. It's strong.
Yeah.
Um, so what project are you most excited about working at Soulfire? And where do you really find your passion?
Mm. I really love right now our work and learn days where people come up and they join us just for a day. But this past work and learn day was during spring break, so there were a lot of families. There were, moms and her two sons, and there was, a family with grandma and auntie and, the cousins. It's just so lovely to get people here who don't have a lot of experience with farming, because anybody of all skill levels can come and join us, and they just enjoy it. It's just fun, and even if there's rain, even if it's cold, everyone just kind of puts their heads down and like gets to work, and we have a lot of laughter and fun, and we eat a delicious meal together. And I love those days. And once we get rolling in more of the season, our fire immersions I also excuse me, really look forward to, because similarly, people are here on the land with us, and in those immersions they're here for an entire week. So you really start to get close to people and form these bonds, and you're all just being together, and growing food and learning about what food apartheid means for you and in your community, and how you can go back to wherever you're coming from and make change there. It's really beautiful.
Can anybody take part in the Soulfire Farm projects? There any like activities, or how do people do that?
So our fire immersions are BIPOC spaces. So Black, Indigenous, people of color, they're specific for spaces for BIPOC, but our work and learn days and our virtual workshops, those are open to everybody. Anybody can come and join us. If you are interested in looking at, what our upcoming dates are, we have a couple in June, I think, that are open now. Soulfirefarm.org. I think there's a tab that says get involved or learn more, one of those, and then you'll see it pops up there, like a volunteer tab. And we also have a YouTube channel, Soulfire Farm, where most of our 3D and our LOL workshops were posted there after the fact. So there's a lot of really great things to learn there, like how to build a raised bed, how to have, pasture raised poultry, beekeeping, like just all those kinds of things are on here. Yeah, and anybody can access those.
Thank you. And I'm going to make it a little bit of a shift, but I think it's really important to talk about equality within the environmental movement, especially within the food movement, as that's how you instigate sustainable and lasting change rather than patch solutions. So why is it important to address inequality within the environmental movement?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you think about the neighborhoods that are low income, predominantly neighborhoods of color, those are going to be, and have shown to be in recent history, the neighborhoods that are most impacted by climate related crises. And not only that, but climate change really in and of itself is a legacy of, extraction from the land, extraction from the people who have been forced to work the land, and extraction from the people who have originally inhabited it. So it's this legacy of, genocide and slavery and colonialism, and that just, you can't really separate the two. So in order to face this issue of, climate change and environmentalism, we have to focus on the systemic inequities that exist as a result of that legacy. And many low-income communities of color too are really close to, like chemical plants and, roadways, and in areas that lead to ill health as it is. and also tend to have less protection, from climate related events. Like New Orleans, when there was, the major hurricanes, the lower income communities were like right in the path after the levees broke. It's just like, it's very common that these neighborhoods are in areas that are less protected, and the people in these areas are already tend to be less healthy. And so their communities, healthy, I mean financially healthy, and yes, physically healthy. So once these climate crises hit, it's much harder to recover, because there's not as much generational wealth. There's not as much, healthy food as it was. So once the grocery stores go down, all that, there's already not that much food there. So yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so for your connection with nature, how has that changed? I know you've talked about your food, but with nature, has that changed with joining Soulfire Farm? And how has that informed the way you interact with the environment? Has it brought any spiritual growth, any personal, any bodily changes that you just really appreciate?
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things, that we really focus on here is reminding, our people that our relationship to nature it's sacred, and it's written, into our DNA. And that was something that I always knew that I had this draw to be in nature, as we do, because we're meant to be. But I didn't really know what couldn't really comprehend what that meant. So, after coming here and being on the land and putting my hands in the dirt and looking into the sky and seeing the robins and the sparrows with their little babies, just coming out of the nest, and just seeing the sunshine, and they're just smelling the air. It was something that I didn't experience growing up in the middle of Los Angeles with cars racing everywhere and just sirens and the noise, And yeah, it's nurtured this like reverence and this respect for the land that I hadn't had before. And it's definitely this spiritual feeling of, everything is interconnected. And that's something for me that's like, if we just pause and listen to, the land and what she's saying, and listen to each other, and, like really come together and be vulnerable, like I think we can heal what's going on with this world. And yeah, it really makes me also recognize how important it is to have our babies be on the land. Like having my daughter, she already, a lot of people say, oh, the baby didn't like, when you put the feet on the grass, like that's a thing.
Yeah.
She's, doesn't, she wants to eat the grass. She wants to eat dirt, which I don't particularly like that. But, like I just am it's so beautiful to me to see how already, even in her short 8 months on this planet, because of where we live and because of how we focus our attention and intention, that she loves the earth. She'll look at a tree and grab a tree, and look at the pond, and she loves animals. And it's just this relationship that we need to reignite, and it's something that is really, really important to me. Yeah, and it's being close to the land too has just like helped me drop so much of the the LA vibe of things, that, always caring about how I look and always worried about my nails and like all the things. I used to straighten my hair every single day, but being here on the land is like, the land does not care. As long as I'm tending to her and treating her with love and respect, that's what she cares about, and that's been a really beautiful thing for me. And I think it can be a thing for a lot of people, because there's so much pressure, for us to look a certain way or be a certain way. But we get in touch with the land, get our feet on the soil, get our hands in the dirt, that's what matters.
So for people who currently live in urban areas and are looking to reconnect, or for the first time connect with nature, and are a bit uncomfortable, I know a lot of dialogue, nature has become this alien, this separate force from us, and we feel so disconnected. How would you suggest they take their first steps? What activities, what small things can they do to feel more comfortable?
I definitely get it. Nature can be all sorts of weird if you're not used to it. But one thing that we actually do with some of the youth programs that come through here is, I forget what the thing is, the exercise is called, but they just take their phones and they just start snapping photos of nature where they see it. and especially nature where they see it, you know, popping up in really urban spaces. So, you know, like the little flower that comes through the crack in the concrete, like take a picture of that, you know, or there's a little, I don't know, sparrow sitting here on the fence, you know, like take a picture of that, like just spotting nature even amongst all the urban environment and recognizing the beauty in that and recognizing that that is also being in nature, you know, because like there's nature right there. Yeah, you're in the middle of the city, but there's grass coming through the concrete. So just recognizing like you already kind of are in it and you're just kind of pushing a little bit further out into the wild, you know, but like takes steps. And then, you know, obviously there's parks and things like that. But I think sometimes even just seeing the little wild places that pop up in the urban areas, it's even more natural than going to a park because the parks are, you know, put there versus these little flowers coming through the concrete. That's a natural thing that's happening. So yeah, just recognizing those little moments, and then as you feel more comfortable, maybe go on a little hike, or you know, maybe you know, like if you're in New York City, Central Park has some really beautiful nature. So like getting into spaces like that.
That's great to hear. I've definitely been trying to reshift my relationship with nature lately. And it's true, like you just look outside, you look at the trees that are growing, the little squirrels. Like the other day, I saw this squirrel go on this crazy adventure trying to hide this nut in the perfect place. And it's nice to recenter yourself and you don't have to drive an hour away to some national park to experience true nature. So that's very nice to hear and that you've been able to find that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as you said, you've recently had a baby, and I've read you shifted to maternal health. So could you tell me a bit more about that transition and what you've learned in developing your practice?
Sure. So, yeah, you know, being pregnant, I always wanted to be pregnant. It was one of my biggest dreams since I was a child. And yeah, so when it finally happened, you know, I was just so blessed and great to be able to be pregnant here on the land and still farming during my pregnancy. And, you know, I had always really been attracted to natural products and things like that. And during my pregnancy, you know, I've started making my own like body butters for my belly and, you know, just really experimenting with all these natural ingredients and medicinal herbs and, you know, just things that I could find around me. Because everyone tries to say, you know, you need to buy this and you need to buy this thing, and this is going to help you with nausea, and this is going to help you do this, and this is going to help your hair not fall, you know, just like all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, it's so many chemicals and so many things. Like, why don't I just make it? And so that then I started selling some of it. I was like, I'll just put it online and see what happens. And so, you know, the shift really, for a big part of it, is just about accessing what you have in front of you, you know. And so for me, I'm lucky that I'm here on the land and I have medicinal herbs that I can access. If I have a stomach ache, you know, I have mint and lemon balm right out here growing. Obviously not right now because it's the beginning of spring, but it'll be there soon. And I have some in my cabinet from last year. You know, like using rosemary for my hair because postpartum shedding is a thing, you know. And I just like having access to all of these products that come from the land. And, you know, for me, a big part of it too is not even really about selling it and making money from it, but more so like reminding people that the medicine comes from the land and that we don't have to spend all this money getting this, you know, expensive nipple butter. You know, like
Yeah.
so much stuff out there and so many things people are going to tell you to buy. But really so much of it can just be made from what's natural. And you can do it yourself. You don't have to buy that tea blend. You could just, you know, have it in your cabinet, have some, you know, loose leaf herbs and make it for yourself. And so for me, it was just like taking control of my own health and, yeah, and utilizing what nature gives me in return for, you know, stewarding her.
So what are some staple plants, medicines that you would suggest for expecting or postpartum mothers?
Red raspberry leaf is one of the ones that everyone will tell you to buy, and it's true. It's actually a really really good tea. It's a uterine tonic, so it's a lot of people will say don't drink it in the first 2 trimesters, but the third trimester you can start drinking it because you're pretty far past, the point of a miscarriage that would be really detrimental. And it helps tone your uterus, which helps you go through labor faster. I will say my labor was 50 hours, so it didn't really work, but my recovery time was super fast. So I feel like, all right, I didn't make it on the front end, but the back end, I made it. What else? So red raspberry leaf, definitely. I used a lot of lemon balm just to ease my stomach. Ginger root, also to ease the stomach. Peppermint for feet, like swollen feet, was a peppermint essential oil was amazing for swollen feet. Same with witch hazel. And yeah, I think those are the ones that I used most.
Very nice. And then do you guys happen to collaborate with any other organizations? It seems like collaboration is one of the main driving forces of Soulfire Farms. And are you planning to work with any organizations in the future?
Yeah, so we are collaborating right now with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives to do the Braiding Seeds Fellowship. So that's one of our biggest collaborations right now, and we're just, having another cohort being interviewed, or the applications end actually on May 1st. So if you're out there and you have a project and you've been farming for at least a year, head to our page, because you should apply for that fellowship. It's really incredibly generous fellowship. So that's one of our primary ones right now, and we collaborate on a variety of different things. Like for the Braiding Seeds, we had Black Farmer Fund and New Communities and a bunch of other organizations help choose the cohort, so they were a part of the application process. And I don't know, we don't have any like particular specific programming or anything planned with anyone, but we do a lot of things like this, like where we have do presentations with other organizations, invite other organizations to come to the land and visit us, and invite other organizations to be a part of our uprooting racism trainings. So we don't have anything specific right now, but we're always doing things behind the scenes with people, even if it's like, yeah, I'm going to sign on to your, petition or help you fundraise and stuff like that.
What about your own community? How do you like working with the people that live with you or work with you?
We're really lucky here. We're really lucky. Let's see how many of us. There's 1, 2, 3. There's like 7 of us on the land who all work here too. Leah and Jonah, partners and co-founders of Soulfire Farm. Naima's here, who's the program director. Ria's here, who is the farm to table manager. Me, and then my husband Kai, who is the Jonah's like assistant. So they're the site team. And it's really beautiful. Like just last night, we had our landmates meeting. We have meetings every week because we're a part of the land cooperative here. And we just had a fire and shared food and, sat around and just enjoyed each other's company. And yes, sometimes we have to talk about business related things, but for the most part, we get to just be together. And it's also really nice too, because, we're out working on the land. We need something, we can holler, like, hey, can someone come run down here and help with this big tarp, that keeps blowing away in the wind. And, there's 5 other people here that can run down and give a hand. So yeah, we're really lucky, and we're still navigating how to be friends and colleagues and landmates and tenants, and all of that. But it's a really beautiful opportunity, and I think it'll help inform, the future of what Soulfire and living on the land and working on the land can look like, in future generations.
And then for people looking for a community like that, and they don't know where to find it or they don't know how to start it, do you have any advice for them on where to look or what to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question, because, for Leah and Jonah, they've been working on this for over a decade, 15 years, I don't know, a long time. And so it takes time. And I think because of the pandemic and because of just the craziness in the world, people were starting to shift more toward communal living, or at least a desire for that. And so I think, finding places where other folks are talking about stuff like that. Leah's book too, Farming While Black, has some really great resources in it that talk about cooperatives and like forming land co-ops and things like that. So it would be a valuable resource to take a look at. But yeah, I think there are people out there. I think in every in every state, in every city, there's probably people out there who are desiring the same thing. So even if that's a post on Facebook in a Facebook group, hey, does anyone want to have a idea session about just this crazy idea I have, like living together and farming together, I think it's possible to find the people. I think it's a matter of whether or not you want to be the person to run with it, or if you want to find another group of people to kind of join on.
And then for those who don't know what it is, could you explain what a land cooperative is?
Sure. So I'm still trying to figure it out, and I think we're still trying to figure out what exactly it means. But basically, what we're doing so far is that Soulfire Farm Land Co-op owns the property here, and Soulfire Farm, the organization, the nonprofit, leases the house and then this 8 acres here for the farm and what's on the land right now. And then anybody else who wants to come and live here. So for instance, me and my husband, we currently live in staff housing, but we are going to buy a piece of land, and build our own house. And so we would be members of the co-op. So we would, we have meetings together. We make decisions on communal living spaces. And then in some cases, like we have a house right now that we're taking applications for that's on the end of the road. That would be like a lease. I can't forget exactly the exact term, but it's like a lease deal where they own the house, but they lease the land, and the co-op owns the land, so that the land in perpetuity stays, with specific uses. So, no fracking and no development of like big, apartment buildings. And so it's just a way of people having their own spaces, but still being able to make sure that the land is treated with respect in perpetuity. So that's kind of the structure that's going on right now. And I think, what makes it a co-op is just that we all meet together and we all make mutual decisions on a variety of things. We want to put in a pond over here. Okay, well, let's meet and talk about what that means for the land and what that means for neighbors and all that.
And caring for the land, I know y'all practice sustainable agriculture, but how does regenerative agriculture play into your practice? And could you explain a few of those practices, whether it's shifting crops every time or just whatever you think our viewers might find useful in their own gardens?
Yeah, so regenerative agriculture basically means that you put back at least as much as was taken or more. So it's a means of regenerating the soil rather than just planting, extracting, and then moving on, and then planting, extracting, and moving on. So one of the ways that we do that is through our ancestral practices, one being heavy mulching. So we heavily mulch here, which means, a mulch is basically just something that covers the ground. And the mulch that we use is straw. We also use hay and wood chips, depending on what plant varieties are there. And what this does is it protects the soil from erosion. It protects it from, the sun being directly on it, so it helps retain moisture. It also suppresses weeds, so it helps weeds, they come up and then they die back and then they biodegrade, and then that's good for the soil. And we do that because we want this organic matter to go back into the soil and regenerate some of the nutrients that the plants that we are then eating are taking out. Another way that we use regenerative agriculture is through raised beds. So all of our beds, we have like our pathways and then they're mounded. And then we have a pathway and then they're mounded. And this again helps with erosion and runoff. It helps retain moisture. And it keeps the topsoil, really, really thick. And we also don't till. So we don't turn over the soil every year. We don't really turn it over at all. And instead we use like mulch. And if you came here, people think that you need to be turning over the soil in order for it to be fluffy and for you to dig into it. It is so soft here. You don't even have to like use a trowel to put in your plant. It's just fluffy, rich earth. And another thing that we are doing now is, polyculturing. So kind of like you mentioned, crop rotation. We never plant the same plant family in the same spot 2 years in a row. We always rotate, and we don't just grow, like an acre of one crop. We grow, 2 rows of kale, and then a row of lettuce, and then a row of scallions, and then a row of, whatever the case. And the reason for doing this is because, the same plants will take out the same nutrients. So if you plant them the next year and we're not really using bagged amendments, we're not really putting extra amendments into the soil, or fertilizers or anything like that. So the same nutrient would be leached over and over and over again, which of course would degrade the soil, and then you're not putting anything back. So that's bad. And it also helps with pests. So if you grow brassicas, which is kale, collards, all of those, broccoli, in the same place, they got aphids, let's say last year, those little white buggies that are terrible. And some of their eggs could still be in that soil. They could even sometimes survive the winter. So if you then plant broccoli the next year again, those little eggs could be like, all right, it's spring, and then they're like, oh, the food that I wanted is right here again. And then they can take off like that again. So it's just a way of, working with the natural cycles to maintain soil health and also maintain your crop health. And then the last one I'll mention is silvopasturing. So one of the things that we know about climate change is that there's a lot of extra carbon in the atmosphere. It belongs in the soil. So we use silvopasture, which is pasturing animals in an orchard. So we just planted a huge orchard of, I guess it's not huge, depends on what you think huge is, but for a small scale farm, it's big. It's like 150 apple, pear, peach, cherry trees. And between the rows, we tractor through our goats, our 3 Nubian goats, and our laying hens, our chickens that we use for eggs. And silvopasture, I forget the number, but I believe silvopasturing can sequester like 2 tons of carbon per acre per year or something like that. It's like an incredible amount of carbon sequestration, which is good for climate change. And it just goes back into the soil where it belongs. So that's a part of regenerative agriculture. We're literally trying to regenerate the earth. So that's how we do that.
Have y'all, are you also applying compost to get more carbon into the soil and sequester it there?
Yeah, so we do use compost. We have our own compost piles. All of us here that live here add to the compost pile, from our food scraps. And yeah, it's one of the practices that we use.
And then, so we know you've inspired like thousands of community members and to help mobilize an equal food system. But who inspires you to keep with this program and keep pursuing natural health for not only you, but your community?
So I think for us, a big inspiration is the community that, Leah and Jonah came from. So like the 518, the Capitol District community. And that's why we maintain the CSA. The CSA used to be much larger. It used to be hundreds of families, and now it's 22 families and 3 institutions. So I think the community here is what really just keeps pushing us forward, because, we don't want to forget the reason why this began, because we've gotten pretty big. People talk about us a lot and, know us, and we've been on TV, and there's so many things that can just happen around here. But really, the places where our hearts feel the most full are when we're actually on the ground with the community members. And I'll speak for myself. But I can see it in everyone's faces, you know, like when community members come here on the farm and they get their hands dirty and they're like, oh yeah, I've been in your CSA, you know, for the last 2 years or whatever. It's like, that's where it's at, that person to person, you know, just really looking at each other's faces and seeing each other as humans. I think that's where the joy comes from, you know, seeing the little kids building their raised garden beds with Soulfire in the city with their mom and siblings, and, you know, and really being inspired by it like that. That's where it's at.
And I think that's so important, especially coming out of COVID. We've been so isolated, and life is going to more individualism and taking away from those familial and paternal connections. So that's beautiful. Y'all can foster such a loving community that not only strives to uplift each other, but is trying to get other communities involved too. So
Yeah.
I love your organization. It's very cool what you do.
Yeah, I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful.
And then also for viewers, if you have any questions, we're going to start wrapping up soon, so you can put them in the chat and we can answer them. But I have a few more. What do you think is the future of sustainable agriculture or Soulfire Farms?
That's a tough question. You know, I think for Soulfire Farm, we have a couple of staff retreats every year where we talk about just that, you know, like what is next for us and, you know, what do we do? And I think, you know, the last one that we had was in October. It was recent. February. There was one in October, one in February. And we talked a lot about, like, who are we accountable to? Who are we accountable to? Where do we plug in to this movement of food justice? And how do we just maintain that, you know, and continue? Like, do we need to grow up? Not really. We need to grow out. So one of the things that we really focus on is the education piece. Like, that's where we plug in, and we're accountable to our 518 community. Like I mentioned, you know, we're accountable to our alumni. We're accountable to, you know, our Braiding Seeds fellows. We're accountable to the people who are actively on the ground with us doing the work. And so being able to maintain our education and, like, boost up our program offerings, you know, even if that's just continuing with our programs the way that they are, but making sure that the learning and the education pieces keep getting, you know, bulkier and bulkier over the years. That's kind of where we're going. So the Braiding Seeds Fellowship, that was a huge step for us, and we hope to be able to continue that and expand that across the nation. You know, right now it's isolated to the east and the south, the northeast and the southeast, but we hope to be able to extend that to the west and to the Midwest. And yeah, just keep on doing our fire immersions and getting people here to learn, and potentially doing an advanced immersion for folks who are a little bit more, you know, deeper into their farming and food justice journey. And yeah, that's kind of where we're headed.
And you've already touched on this, but why specifically is changing our food system important for the environment, especially in the face of climate change?
Well, you know, one of the primary, or a very, very large part of carbon comes from the agricultural system, the way that it is. It's just not, the large scale monoculture farming is just not good for the earth. And not even if you even just put aside the amount of, you know, resources that it uses, like the land that is being used and extracted, and kind of just like, there's land across the country that is unusable. You know, you cannot farm it anymore because it was monocultured for so long that it's just barren. And the amount of resources it would take now to regenerate it would be immeasurable. So, you know, sustainable agriculture, it basically what it does is makes it so that you don't have to do that. You know, you don't have to be like, crap, you know, what do we do now? It's like, no, you just do the practices, you do the regenerative practices as you go, so that that doesn't happen. It's maintenance, you know, and it's reverence, and it's giving respect. You know, like we go to the doctors and we brush our teeth and we brush our hair and we do all of these things to our bodies to avoid having, you know, rotten teeth out of our head, you know, at the end of the day, like all these things that we do for maintenance, it's the same thing with the land. You know, we have to be maintaining it. We have to be caring for it in a way that will ensure that our future generations actually have land to grow food on and to live on. And we can do it, you know, like we can do it. There's enough land right now for us to be able to implement these practices and save it. But it's kind of got to happen now.
And how would you suggest people support this movement to sustainable agriculture?
There are a lot of organizations out there, you know, yes, ours, but also many others. You know, I think finding organizations that are in your area, and it depends on what you are interested in too. If you're more interested in, you know, the politics and the legislation, there are organizations out there whose focus is on that. If you're more interested in the agriculture and actually farming, you know, there are organizations like ours that are doing more of that. And depending on what skills you have, volunteering your time, you know, calling your legislators, getting in contact with farms in your area and talking to them about their farming practices, and, you know, maybe offering some wisdom or some books that could help them shift some of their practices to be more sustainable. If you have family members who are farmers, which many people do in certain areas, you know, offering some advice to them about how to shift some of their practices over. But ultimately, I think a big part is just finding those organizations in your area and offering your support. You know, for someone, there's just so much you can do. There's so much that organizations need. If you can't get there, you can't be on the land, they need administrative help. Absolutely. You know, so there's always ways that you can tag in and offer support.
Lovely. Thank you. And then where can people follow you and Soulfire Farm?
So you can follow Soulfire Farm at this Instagram, so Soulfire Farm, and on Twitter at Soulfire Farm, and on Facebook at Soulfire Farm, and Soulfire Farm. And then soulfirefarm.org is our website, and my Instagram is the Babbling Brooke Marie. It's very long.
It's cute.
Thank you. I used to have a blog called the Babbling Brooke, and it just kind of yeah. And so that's where I'm at. And, you know, I mostly post things about Soulfire Farm and being here, but occasionally I do post things about my Brooke's Botanicals and some of the products that I make for postpartum care mostly.
Wonderful. I want to thank you for your time. That's all the questions I have. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Any questions for me?
I think the one thing I'll say is that, you know, to not be intimidated by the land. Like, I know it's intimidating to get out in nature if you haven't been out in it before, but the land will always embrace you. Even if it's in a way that you don't expect, it'll always embrace you. You know, like we had kids come out here once, not that long ago, and it gets really muddy here in the spring. And, you know, they were wearing their, you know, Nikes and, you know, just coming out here looking not like they were dressed for a farm. But as we're walking through collecting sticks to build terraced beds, one of the young girls, you know, she gets her foot stuck in the mud and she's like screaming and hanging on her friends like, oh my gosh, and her shoe comes off and she stuffs her sock in the mud, and it embraced her. The land embraced her. And she had the biggest laugh, like she just had the biggest like shocked / happy / what is happening face. And it was like such a beautiful moment because it just reminded me of how, you know, like just get on the land, get in the dirt, just allow it, just let it happen. And I heard her after talking to some of her, like, oh my God, I fell in the mud. And it was like the most exciting thing I think that had happened to her in, you know, who knows how long. But yeah, it's just a cute story that just reminds me of how, even if you're not prepared for it, like it'll embrace you in a way that will make you happy, you know, make you smile, even if it doesn't seem like it in the moment.
It's a beautiful story. I think we all need to get a little bit dirtier nowadays.
Absolutely. And she was so happy. She's like, can you spray it off with my, you know, with the hose? And so we're spraying it off. It's so dirty now. You know, it was great. It was beautiful.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This is my first IG Live, so I really appreciate everybody who joined, and for you joining me is an absolute pleasure. And I've been following Soulfire Farm for a while now, so really great opportunity to speak with you and learn more. And to everybody else who joined, I want to say thank you for continuing to support WeINSPIRE and consider donating through our website at weinspiremovement.org. What allows interns such as myself to develop life skills that we can utilize to inspire change and positivity as we enter the workforce. But thank you once again, Brooke.
Thank you. You did a great job too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great night and stay inspired.
Thank you, you too. Bye.